Hello everyone, I'm so thrilled to be here today, and I just want to start by thanking you all, by honoring you all for being so bold and brave and for rolling up your sleeves and getting out on the playing field and tackling some of the biggest, most challenging, most daunting issues of our times. It's so important. It's the most important work in the world. And I am so inspired by all of you. When I was in high school, I was far from the playing field. I was not even thinking about these issues. I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts. I think we don't need to see me play. So I grew up in Lynn, and that's north of Boston, and right down the street from one of the biggest incinerators in the state, nearby oil refineries, pretty polluted community. Nobody ever talked about those issues. My favorite piece of reading, as I wrote in my book, was 17 magazine, and I love to spend lots of time at the Osco Drug Cosmetics aisle looking for the perfect products that would magically transform me into the confident, lovable version of myself. And I was really intent on seeing how big as possible I could get my hair with Aquanet. So this was the 80s, of course. And as I said, no one was talking about these issues back then. And so I went on to become a reporter. I was a journalist for many years. I lived in Colorado. I published a newspaper and began learning about environmental issues, about chemical controversies. The county wanted to spray down all the bike paths with pesticides at one point to control the weeds, and there was a huge community eruption, and that's how I began to learn about chemicals and just the thought that they would be spraying untested chemicals all over the most beautiful areas of the county where kids and pets run and play. It was very poignant to me to learn, and when I interviewed government officials and scientists, the extent to which they could tell me everything about the weeds and the terrible danger to the ecosystem, but almost nothing about the health effects of the chemicals that they were proposing to spray. So that was my first introduction into the problem of chemicals. And we were also dealing at that time with a lot of corporate power issues, the big companies coming into the community and trying to own all of the businesses of the ski resorts. And so it was kind of like a microcosm Main Street versus Wall Street struggle. And so I really wanted to get engaged on a bigger playing field, and I moved eventually to Washington, D.C. and worked for political campaigns, and then began working with some of the leading scientists, MDs, and researchers in environmental health, first through a group called Healthcare Without Harm, and met EWG. We hooked up and decided to launch the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics in 2002, so that was 10 years ago, and started to research what kinds of chemicals are in the products that we're putting on our babies, putting on our skin, in the bathtubs with our kids, and have built a huge trove of data to answer that question through the Skin Deep database, amazing resource, and also sending hundreds of products to laboratories to test them to identify chemicals that weren't listed on labels. So lots of great info is available on all that research at safecosmetics.org. And about 8 months ago, I decided to take a break from that and go and work on even a bigger field against more difficult corporate opponents, and that was to work on Prop 37, the California Right to Know campaign to label genetically engineered foods. And thank you so much. First, I want to take a moment to say thank you to Paul Towers and Michael Bronner, Walter Robb, Renee, EWG, so many of you in this room who came together, Teens Turning Green, a big part of it. It was a huge community effort, a beautiful grassroots movement that is, even though we didn't win, and it was painful that we didn't win, and the numbers are getting even closer, it's just a 3.5 point spread. We still almost won, despite the fact we still almost won. And we did win in many ways. Yes. We did win in many ways. It was a huge victory of a people's movement. We had 10,000 volunteers throughout and here at this perfect moment comes one of the most amazing and inspiring people from the campaign, and really who got me interested in getting involved in Prop 37, Pam Larry, who's going to be speaking later this afternoon. It's just one of my favorite examples of a woman who just said, this is wrong, that 90% of people in the country want to know what's in their food, and the companies are telling us we can't know, and I'm going to go out and do something about it. And so this story of what people can do, what one person can do and organize a community, and then what we can all do when we come together, is so inspiring. And so thank you to all of you who were involved in that fight. It was kind of also very exhausting. So now I'm taking a break. But that's another reason why I'm so inspired by all of you young people, because you are out there. You are so much further ahead with knowledge, with power, with the tools that you have at your disposal than I could even think about back when I was your age. So that's how I know that we're going to win. It's because of all of you in this room. And so I just want to use the rest of my time to say a couple of just observations and things about the power that I think we do have and that we can all use every day. And the first thing I want to say, just as an overall big picture, is that I truly, and I think Renee said this earlier, it's truly the most exciting time to be alive and to be engaged in this work, because we know so much now that we have never known in the whole course of human history. And I think that's so exciting. One of my favorite quotes by Alice Walker, she wrote a wonderful book called "We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For," which is a quote from a June Jordan poem. We are the ones we've been waiting for. I love that, it's true. And her quote was, "These are the best of times, because we have entered a period, if we can bring ourselves to pay attention, of great clarity as to cause and effect." So we know too much now to keep doing things the way we've been doing them. And one of the biggest things we know is that the environment is our bodies. The same poisons that are running through the rivers that are being dumped in the oceans are running through our own bodies, through our breast milk, into every single baby born on Earth. And that was a moment of clarity for me in learning about the science, and Renee mentioned this earlier, the studies that EWG has done on blood and urine, and even on the umbilical cord bloods of newborn infants, that found hundreds of industrial chemicals known to be toxic inside babies that had just been born. So I think that's truly the wake-up call to say, how can we do things differently? Once we see that picture, we have no choice but to say, how can we do things differently? And so that's what you are all here doing. And living every day is the answer to that question, how can we do things differently? And I think we have to ask it in a way that says, how can we do things differently, radically? We need to do things radically different, not just a little bit different. And I loved Andy's story about the forks. It reminded me of being at the Sustainable Cosmetics Summit and seeing a presentation by Procter & Gamble. Now, they didn't want to talk anything about the chemicals in their products. They actually said the worst environmental problem associated with our products is the amount of time people spend in the shower. That may be true. But they also had a presentation about Gillette razors and said we've drastically reduced the plastic in these razors to the point where in 1 year we've saved the amount of plastic that would equal the weight of a Boeing 737. Imagine that. And everybody's clapping, and I'm sitting there thinking, how much weight in Boeing 37s are being used in Gillette plastic razors every single day that don't even need to exist, because they created this market to make us think that plastic razors are what we need so that we can dispose them and keep buying them. So we have to keep in mind that these corporations, as much as we need to also work with them, are really driven by continuing to sell us things we don't need. And so I want to end with just 3 things about how, in working on Prop 37, it was easy to get frustrated about the amount of power that these companies do have, because they really and truly do control way too much the processes of government, the media, and also the processes of science, so that even what we're learning from science is largely driven by the agenda of the corporations. And so they have a lot of power. But the real story is, we have the power. We have the power because we're the ones making the choice every day about which companies we support with our money, which products we bring into our homes and put on our bodies, and that's a lot of power. So I want to just say to all of you, 3 types of power real quick, because they're giving me the hook. The power of purchasing, obviously, the companies that you choose to buy from, and really thinking about how can we support local sustainable companies, and how can we start local sustainable companies and businesses and support each other. Secondly, the power of politics. We also have to engage in politics. As frustrating as it can be, we can't leave that ground. And we have to fight to get our democracy back in many ways. And so, and the Teens Turning Green have been a huge part of bringing the issue of safe cosmetics to the legislative agenda, both in the state of California and now at the national level. And lastly, And I want to end just by saying the greatest power of all is the power of all of you. To stand up, to be leaders in your community, to teach. Because once you know these things, and I think you've all learned this, you can't unknow them. You can't go back to being the way we were before. And for every person you teach, it's the same for them. And in this way, we're building a movement that is truly unstoppable, and it's really going to be you and the energy that you have. And I want to just end quickly with showing, since Erin mentioned it, I have to show my picture of Erin in my book, because I love this picture. You probably won't be able to see it, but it's very cute, and it's Erin wearing a prom dress and combat boots. This was 6 years ago, and it was a moment when it was so inspiring to me, because I was just feeling really down about writing this book. It was hard, and I went out to spend time with the Teens Turning Green at Union Square. They had Project Prom, and just the sight of 20 teenage girls on stage wearing prom dresses and combat boots saying they were going to kick the butt of the $50 billion beauty industry. It was like, that's the most awesome thing I've ever seen, and that's the energy that's going to change the world.